Comes Joni.
Hello.
Hi, Joni. Good to meet
Hi.
you.
You too. Thanks for taking the time.
Uh, always. Um, so, what would you like to do to me?
Is that actually where you're sitting?
No, it's actually somebody's library, but not mine. And I don't know whose it is.
Awesome.
I ought to ask Google where it is, but
Yeah, it's really cool.
I had a chat one day with God, who's the brain user, Klaus? I can't remember his name.
Jerry?
Yeah, Jerry. He's got a link to the actual owner of this library in his brain someplace. So he brought
Cool.
it up and showed it to me one day. But when I saw it, I couldn't resist it. And then I said, God, I'm sure glad I don't have to dust it.
I know, right? That would be quite a challenge.
Yes, all
Yes,
my
for
books are
sure.
electronic.
And Jean, where are you located? Where are you
I'm
today?
on the Outer Banks in North Carolina, about a mile from the Wright Brothers Memorial. I tell
Oh,
people I live on
beautiful.
a sandbar.
Yeah, it's probably true.
Mm.
Yeah, you guys are safe from the waters. I saw some pretty
Well,
frightening footage.
the last hurricane that went through a month ago ended up being 4 hours west of us, and it hit Raleigh, and we were essentially unscathed. But it didn't matter much
Yeah.
because we were in New York anyway. So
Yeah, wow. Well, cool. Well, I've heard a lot of amazing things about your work, and I'm a big admirer of anybody who is fully invested in systems theory. That's something I've been in complexity theory. I've been a big fan for a long time and attempting to wrap my head around it. So
been 49 years now.
it's
So
awesome.
since Stafford Beer's platform for change in 1975, it was like taking mind-altering drugs. I mean,
Yeah, I bet.
so I
That's
went through
very
the
cool.
presentation, all
Thank
right,
you.
which is amazingly well put together. Uh,
Thanks.
Klaus and I went through it once or twice before, I think. Um,
Hmm.
and
Different approach, yeah.
yeah,
Great.
so it makes sense. And in terms of examples that it's valid, people have been doing regenerative farming for 30 years. Some people, well, a few
Hmm.
people longer than
Some
that.
longer. Yeah,
You know, I
yeah.
mean, you go watch 50 Gabe Brown videos and you become a believer. Um, and though, it's we live in this world where people believe things ought to be immediate. I decided I want to do regenerative farming and I want it regenerated by Monday.
Yeah,
And and
don't really work that way.
and how long does it take? I mean, I probably watched The Biggest Little Farm 10 times already. It's an addictive film. Um, and it took them 5 to 7 years to
Hmm.
regenerate that piece of property.
Hmm.
Every step that was progress brought new problems that they didn't know they were going to experience. And in learning
Hmm.
how to deal with them, it created new problems until they finally figured out that uh, you can do it in harmony with nature so that everything supports everything else, which makes the film just so addictive because
It
you're
does.
just rooting for them all the way through. All right.
Yeah.
And uh, so, though, as Churchill said, you can count on the Americans to do the right thing right after they've tried everything else. So that it makes sense is still an uphill climb. Yeah, I mean, we've been trying to sell systems thinking to the world since Bertalanffy in the 1930s, and we have a few people that we have convinced, but there are couple of 100,000 Kumu users, and there are 10 million Miro users, and they're different products for different intent, and So I'm rambling. What do you want? I mean, there's no
Klaus,
magic bullet.
no, there is definitely not. Klaus, what are your thoughts on, just what direction to take the discussion?
Well, Gene and I have been talking about this particular business model, connecting farm to fork, and the complexities that engages within the entire supply chain. So there is the dominant conversations that are in the regenerative movement are all focused on the farmer. What the farmer needs to do, to use cover crops, don't till, put in pollinator strips and 1,000 things. But you change your seeds, change your crops, put legumes in, put perennials in, so all of that stuff. And then the industry that talks about regeneration and regenerative wants to have these farmers sort of maybe use a cover crop, but kill it in time so it doesn't use too much water with glyphosate, right? Maybe try some, but they basically want to maintain the existing crop structure because the entire supply chain is specialized, from aggregation to storage to milling and what have you, to deal with these GMO type crops. So we have been talking about the need to really look at this as an entire system where you are creating a push-pull dynamic, right? Between and puts the design imperative on the farmer, on the soil, right? So whatever we do and change, it has to be regenerative to the soil. That is a complete paradigm shift because that's not what the industry is. So then you're saying, and as Gene just saying, it's going to take years, to do this. So where do you start, and where do you insert this process into the system? And then most likely you have to start building up, from the ground on up, because one critical component of this whole change is that you have to decentralize and develop bioregion specific food systems, which right now the dominant industrial system ignores bioregion specificity worldwide, right? I mean, they grow the same damn potato in China that they grow in Idaho, they grow in Indonesia, what have you, and they just plaster it with chemicals to make that work. But if the target is to restore the biodiversity and the soil dynamics in a specific piece of land, then you have to be bioregion specific. So Gene and I have been talking about this for years, right? And so I'm excited about Joni because she gets it and she's prepared to put an organizational dynamic around this idea. And I've tried multiple times, and the basically commercial customers think it can't be done because you can't change people's eating habits. I mean, they have the same argumentations that you have in the energy sector, you have in the food sector. It can't be done, right? So we have to stay within the box, and the box doesn't work anymore. You have to blow up the box, and rebuild it. So the challenge we have right now, Gene, is that, I mean, the idea is pretty well expressed, right? There are some missing pieces, particularly on the market side, to engage, who exactly would we engage with on the market side? Kellogg, restaurant chains, catering organizations, and so on. So we have to flesh that out to see where is the potential for what customers are. But then and then we have to be able to take this to funders, and there are plenty of funders out there who are interested in getting this thing started if now something has the credibility and the apparent competency to make this work. But we need to develop an organizational frame, and Joni right now is struggling with how to set that up because she has existing commitments with several, the smaller companies that she has shares in, or she's partner, or she owns, and she has partners in. So to set up like an umbrella structure, that can connect that owns the intellectual property, basically, that or the intelligence that manages the intelligence required, but then brings in talent as needed, on maybe a subcontracting form or some arrangement that doesn't necessarily convey ownership, but participation in this process.
Yeah.
So contractually structured and so on. So we haven't been able to put this on a piece of paper. So when you look at the slides, it's what page are we on here? There is an activist nation with everything that is required around it. Technical service providers, of course, farmers and markets, but logistics, aggregation, storage and warehousing, and so on. So, so how do you translate this into an organizational construct, that can actually be made to work?
Yeah. And in all fairness, like, I've been trying to figure out how that would look since 2016, and I was on a board of a nonprofit at the time that was a food systems advocacy group, and we were using systems theory and complexity science to try to figure out how to optimize our regional food systems in where I live here in Northern Idaho. And, and that's when I, founded what I call Green Eats Global Project, which was like, to try to get everybody onto a digitized connected network that would be kind of like a Priceline.com or like a Zillow or, one of these aggregation type digitized networks that would allow for efficient communication across disparate industries and verticals, and then have a technology add-on that would allow us to have like digitization, like through blockchain, or utilize AI and things like that to make it more efficient. And it's just been tough because at the time, 2016, 2017, people said this was mad. They literally were like, stay in your lane. This is crazy. This isn't needed. And then that's what ended up prompting me to build other things. Because they said, if you ever want to do this, you're going to have to self-fund it because nobody's going to ever fund something like this. And so go build another business and sell it, and then you'll have the money to do what you really want to do. Well, that was dumb advice. I mean, but I just didn't know. Like, I came from the health sciences. I was a ethnopharmacologist, and then I went into critical care nursing, ER, trauma, ICU for 15 years. So they were like, you don't have any business know-how. Stay in your lane, So interestingly enough, but yeah, so that's where we're at right now.
Which just motivates you to go prove them wrong.
Well, I kind of am that person. I've come to realize and just have the self-awareness that rebel streak runs deep, apparently. So I'm stubborn, apparently. My husband would disagree, of course. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, we're just at this crossroads where I'm willing now to just, say, look, everything else needs, like, we can't accomplish anything I've started without having this framework in place, like this community digitized network. It's the fact that we don't have it makes my work at my other companies slow, because we need to plug into something like this in order to get the work done. And I know a lot of different people who have the same pain point. And even this week, having conversations with some very large players in the market, I said, look, if you could be a part of a digitized community that had some privacy in place, like it's a closed, it's a vetted community where you could access this type of stuff, would that be valuable to you? And they said, yes. And I said, would you be willing to pay for it, a reasonable amount? And they said, absolutely. So, you know, I'm finding that to be a stronger signal on the market side. And then as far as farmers, we have, you know, we already have about 50,000 acres signed up. And we've got a whole lot more that intend to do it as soon as harvest is over and they can sit down and get caught up on paperwork. So I think we could get to 1 million acres. John Kempf is somebody I work closely with. He's an Amish farmer in Ohio, and he's got about 2.5 million acres in his farmer network. And he has been an advisor for Snacktivist, my other company, for the last couple of years, and he seems pretty sure that we could get a couple of million acres of farmland signed up for something like this if it were available.
So my comment to Klaus repeatedly has been, okay, I spent many years as a terrible consultant.
A terrible consultant?
Yes, where lots of great ideas never got implemented.
Mm-hmm.
And one day someone told me that the formula is you have to know what, know why, care why, know how. And the care why piece is always missing. Because we have these good ideas and we know why, and then we try and explain to people how to do it. And they don't give a shit, right? They don't have a basis for caring.
Right.
So the same thing that was promoted in the numerous books by the Heath brothers, Fix and Stitch and Switch and Upstream and Moments and all the rest of them. They've written a half dozen books, but it's all chapters in one book on change. That you have to realize that there's a logical rider on an emotional elephant. And the logical rider has a small amount of control over where the elephant decides it wants to go. So it's essential to make an emotional connection with people so that they choose to care. And people will change their habits once they experience enough pain.
Mm-hmm.
You look at what Lee did decades ago in China on the Lost Plateau, in the regeneration of that entire area. The farmers were destitute because nothing grew.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to care because they knew that if they didn't, they're going to die. There was nothing to eat. And when they regenerated the plateau, each one of the farmers owned a piece of the puzzle. It was like a co-op.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I mean,
they had a dog in the fight. Mm-hmm.
Right. So and if you read Montgomery's book on dirt, you know, when he gives this person a tour throughout the countryside, and he says, here's the people that are doing regenerative farming, and here are the people that are going out of business.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I've talked to David about this, David and Ann, about this concept. And he was like, give it time, and there's going to be a huge pain point because people, I mean, it's happening right now. Like farmers are, you know, they're on the brink of bankruptcy, or they're losing productivity because of soil erosion. Mm-hmm.
Or you put enough chemicals in the soil so it won't grow anything.
I know. It's literally where we're at in a lot of areas. So I think that pain point is becoming very palpable and very real. But the ones that, you know, are already feeling the pain and seeing the reasoning, both have barriers that are so prohibitive that are represented by the complexities of the value chain in reaching the market.
Mm-hmm. Well, because of the complexity, it's not a problem that the farmer can solve on their own. Right?
No, and they shouldn't.
Because what they produce has to go someplace.
Yeah.
And the places that it goes have to want what they produced. so that there needs to be a coordination between those who want and those who are in a position to provide, so that they meet up with each other, as opposed to, well, everybody grows corn this year and there's a great harvest, so the corn crop isn't worth shit because there's too much of it. All right.
Right. Yeah, which is what happened to us last year with our promotion of underutilized crops and millets. Like we did in the UN did a big initiative, and I co-founded North American Millets Alliance a few years back with some other nerdy advocates of underutilized crops like myself. And what we found is that, you know, here we are partnered with Dryland Genetics, and they're doing some incredible work with, you know, just good old fashioned, you know, genetics and breeding without modification and CRISPR and whatnot. But, you know, and there was this huge push, and then we had a lot of farmers plant millet, but we had not successfully moved the market. And we had even more problems when there really was only one company in the entirety of the United States that could dehull it and make it ready for human consumption. And it's Bay State in Colorado, and they're unwilling to do any toll milling for anybody. So it was like a nightmare. They, you know, they planted this millet, and then there was like no place to put it. So the price plummeted. And, you know, and so we need that coordination. We need we need a feedback loop so that the market and the farmers can be responsive. Because on the same breath, last year, Walmart calls me up, and they're like some mid to upper executive folks at Walmart. They said, hey, we've decided we're interested in millet. This millet thing has got our interest in these climate resilient crops and orphan crops. And, you know, word on the street is you can help us with this. And so I was like, well, definitely, you know, I mean, I know a lot of farmers who would love to grow millet, but, you know, we've got some infrastructure and maturity issues, but we need a partner to move it forward. And so again, it's like that whole need for that innovation brokerage concept where, you know, you're bringing people together. I since got a $3 million USDA grant to put in a millet huller in Montana so we can have more access. I'm a minor shareholder in that. I'm not the operator, but you know, it's opening up those market, and I'm the value chain coordinator. That's my role in that grant, is to coordinate the value chain to develop on the farm and agronomy and genetics side, and also the market side simultaneously. And it's like really made me realize like we need this for many commodities, not just millet, because the issues are, you know, throughout the whole system, time and time again. And you might as well figure out a business model that can do this efficiently and at scale, and so that I'm not the bottleneck, because I get pulled into these kind of as like a bespoke person, like, oh, hey, create a program for us, like with the bonza beans right now, create a program. Well, so we brought in the co-op, like a huge co-op, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds a year, big co-op, and a farmer group that can do glyphosate-free garbanzo beans, and then the buyer, and now we're lining it up to get it through the value chain, 3 million pounds of garbanzo beans. It's like, I feel like these are coming all the time, more and more. And so to consolidate that, to kind of not consolidate, but to create some formalization and some structure around it. And I was so grateful to Klaus for introducing the word innovation brokerage to me, because I had never heard that word before. Or if I had, it didn't strike me at the time as being the word I was looking for. But I think it is, you know, if you have a digitized community and then you have an innovation brokerage service model, we could solve the things that people say are unsolvable. And I know that there's a need, because it's finding me. Last year I think it was over 20 million pounds of regeneratively grown commodities come through my phone in 3 months looking for market. That's a lot.
And what was the market looking for?
The market was saying, we'd like to have regenerative, but it doesn't exist. So I was like, yeah, right. I was like at these conferences, and they were like, oh yeah, we'd love to have regenerative, but we have to build our own regenerative programs because regenerative isn't already out there. And I took them to task, and I said, that's actually not true. We know it's out there. And it's being sold into the co-ops at just regular commodity prices. No provenance, no premium, no pride in stewardship. So, yeah, I know it's an interesting thing, but it's a fun challenge. But formalizing how this comes together and creating a business model, you know, and I'm haunted by those early stories that I have in my past, like in 2017, where they said there's no business model that could make money off of, you know, having a community like this, which at the time I should have pushed back a little bit harder. So I was using Priceline.com as a example. And oddly enough, I had a phone call with one of the founders of Priceline.com this week, and he's very interested in this model. So in fact, Klaus, we're going to get on a call with him. He's a really interesting guy. And he's doing some really cool projects now, and he married a woman who grew up on a dairy farm. So now he's like really kind of keyed in on food system resiliency and whatnot. So as the worm turns, right?
Is it a co-op model?
No, not necessarily. I think co-op models they're wonderful in a sense, but they can be overly they can be stifled by consensus, and they can be slow to respond to needs because of like too much governance. You know, like I think that there's something to be said for having a fine balance between representation of a community, like the spirit of a co-op, but with like a very nimble nucleus of governance that can make decisions quicker. Because one of the reasons that co-ops have struggled, I mean, there's great co-ops, and then there's co-ops that have struggled and gone out of business because they can't reach conclusions fast enough because it's too distributed of governance. Like they can't respond to things quickly that are needed to be responded to quickly. And so last year we did a really deep dive on co-op governance when we were structuring the millet dehuller in Montana. And Montana actually has a really good nonprofit and government support system for co-ops. They do consulting, deep dive business evaluations, and feasibility studies, like all of that stuff. And after many, many, many hours, it became clear to me that I don't think a true co-op structure is the way forward for it.
So?
Not in today's market where you need to be nimble and you need to move fast.
There are several software models, software platforms that can accommodate this kind of thing. I mean, Alibaba is probably the best example, but
yeah,
in China, you know, where they have created basically an online platform where a buyer can post, I need 200 tons off.
yeah,
and then you have multiple farmers or groups representing farmers pick off, I can take 10 tons, I can do 5 tons, and then that comes together. There's an organization behind it. So clearly IT is going to be a very important component here.
yeah,
In order to build out this capacity. And I think the thing that Joni is struggling with right now is to create the infrastructure, organizational infrastructure around this. So she has one partner in a company that has developed a blockchain technology that would be very helpful to maintain the integrity of products. I mean, the documentation that required to certify the integrity of products. But that's so you need to get started basically, right? So to build and not wait until you have the perfect technology, but to build something you can start with and then expand on it and use software that has the capacity to grow.
Yeah. And we have working pilots that we've built on the blockchain. So, which is great. Like, so we have functionality pilots that we can demonstrate that we built, which is great. But what we really need, though, I truly believe that it needs to serve a community. to really meet its optimized potential. And that's what I love about, bringing together, I used to call it the conscientious Alibaba model, just because Alibaba doesn't have that filter in place, to like align around a mission, vision, value. Like Alibaba is just like, cool, if you want to sell it, we'll sell it. Like, and that's cool and all. But, if you're trying to service a little bit more of a holistic, or like like a spirit of regeneration, where you're not just letting any old, like anybody in. Like, I think that there's something to be said for having it be like a vetted community, not to be exclusive, but to where you're like, hey, look, if you're a farmer and you're wanting to, go towards a regenerative model, but you're just getting started, we at least need to see what you're doing to get started. So that way there's not greenwashing, and so that there can be, some sort of alliance within the community around some shared mission, vision, values. And that's what led me to taking a deep dive into DAOs and, decentralized autonomous organizations that they do live on blockchain and they're completely autonomous. It's like tech co-ops in a way. And so I took a deep dive with that with Kat Taylor, Klaus, because she's a big fan of DAOs as well. And but we still haven't figured out how that would actually be like I think that would be a lot more chasing of details. Like, I don't think that those frameworks are established well enough. And there's a lot of Wild West kind of happening there, where it's still a little too far out to be widely adopted by like the average person, like farmer or manufacturer. So, which brings me back to just an intentional digitized community that can be, social in nature, really, but then has that working kind of marketplace aggregation functionality to it, so that we can actually get stuff done rather than just talking about the world we wish we lived in.
Yeah, and that's the important thing here, not just talking about it, right? But put a stake in the ground and move it. So,
Right.
so that requires a project plan. And you want to keep this dynamic so that you can be self-funding your project, right? So so good starting point would be, so we have this group of farmers and we become representatives of these farmers seeking markets. That's an initiation, right? And then you build this out further. So for example, we talked about carbon markets. So you could put farmers that are wanting to get into the network on a contract that is aligned with the USDA soil regeneration program, and the government passed the Growing Climate Solutions Act 2 years ago, and it's now in the implementation phase. And the Growing Climate Solutions Act is basically developing guidelines for farmers to comply with, to assure that they can enter, that they can sell credits into carbon markets. Okay.
Yeah.
So this, I think I sent you that. I developed a
contract
structure, right? So that these farmers then would get into this contract and open up a revenue source in the process, because so we could talk Nori, for example, bring Nori in as a partner in this endeavor, right? As a carbon trading platform, and then create small pieces of carbon credits that can be sold, out there in the to any number of diverse investors. But anyway, so the selling point, of what we're trying to do here is that you are dealing with farmers who are in various stages of regeneration, reducing chemical inputs and increasing the nutritional value of their food, right? So that's the selling point. We are representing these groups, and we need to find buyers, who are going to prioritize this group, and maybe pay a small premium, certainly pay commission for us to do that work, right? Which internally would take
Yeah.
them, a lot of staffing, but then
Yeah.
create a revenue flow to the farmers through this carbon credit now. So that can be part of the business model. But that, in my mind, would best be expressed in form of a project plan, where you say step
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Project plan. And would be, I mean, especially with that deep implementation, like that could be great being regionally focused. And what's interesting too is last week I had a call with a longtime friend and colleague who's also an investor in Snacktivist Foods, Tim Crosby. I think I mentioned him to you earlier this morning, Klaus. And he had just been in Europe at like one of these problem-solving think tank week-long intensives with a very well-known organization and family office. And they basically said, well, what we need is X, which oddly enough, I walked him through the presentation. He goes, yeah, basically what we just said we needed to design is what I'm seeing here in this presentation. But they had identified a region that they wanted to start in the Midwest. Corn is king and soy and all that. So, it's interesting how like there's people, and these people are funders. I mean, this was hosted by Rockefeller Foundation kind of a deal. So there is money set aside to, help invest in developing a proof of concept in a project like this. I think right now, maybe even not even investment like dilutive equity, but just even like, because it needs to be done so bad. I don't know. It's just.
Gene, do you, following this conversation here, do you get a sense that we have expressed a value proposition here the way we are describing it in this presentation?
From the some things that Joni said, there are people on both sides of the puzzle that need something to connect them in the middle. She's hearing from the market who's looking for things, and she's hearing from farmers who got things that not sure where they're supposed to go. But the real value proposition is an advanced heads up of what the market thinks it's going to want next year or in the future, so that you have a better sense of what to plant. And what to plant, what it's best for you to plant on the type of soil that you've regenerated, as opposed to, the market wants corn, but you're missing certain nutrients out of the soil to grow a healthy crop of corn. You might better be growing legumes this season to put stuff back in to the soil so that you can grow something better next season. So that, I looked at this one slide in this presentation. It says current used U.S. food system model. The current U.S. food system model is real simple. Make money. I mean, that's all, right? You get in the weeds of the detail, you get confused about what the real motivation is. So that if you want to catch people's interest, show them how to make more money. And show them how to make more money doing the right things, as opposed to making less money.
Right. Because if we can incentivize doing the right thing, the right thing will be done. If you can find a financial motivation and an incentive to do it differently in a way that's better, like they will come, and that's just the reality of it. And so many of the farmers that are the early adopters for regenerative that I work with, they're like, as soon as, you show that you're more profitable, that's when the neighbors start to follow. And they laugh at first. And now we have these clusters of regenerative farms in regions, because it started with one. And then even though they hadn't developed differentiated markets, they started showing that after the initial investment, they were more profitable, even just selling at the elevator. because they've reduced their investment upfront in chemicals and tillage and whatnot. So it's an interesting paradox. But now we need to incentivize the market side of things. I think that the farmers will come along, honestly. They'll go to where there's better markets, because especially in a year like this, where every farmer I know is losing at least $250,000 if they're of any sizable volume at all. They're looking for alternatives.
Gabe Brown also says that you need to be resilient. So you have to have multiple lines of business.
Well, right? Diversifying the value valence is what I call it, the value valence that comes off of any sort of natural resource acreage. Like if we don't change the paradigm away from acres and bushels and productivity, so like that's the only metric of value for farmland is bushels per acre. But the reality is you're degrading the real estate value by not investing in the soil. So that's one value layer. And then there's all these other value layers that are there. We just don't quantify them, and we don't translate them into a tradable asset. So that's where my other company, Rhizos, works, is how do we discover the hidden value in these systems so that we can truly change the axiology of how we assign value to farm and field level activities, and eventually realize that there is value to intact ecosystems as well. Like for example, we did one of our projects at Rhizos, the blockchain company, is we went to a farm and we created APIs with all of their farm and agronomy and financial platforms that they use. So they have John Deere Ops, they have Harvest Profit for banking, they have all these different things. So we got them all together, we put them on chain, and then we evaluated them and created profit heat maps for the farm. So he was doing different regenerative implementations on different parts of the acreage. And there was one strip of farm that no matter what he did to it, he just felt like it was losing money. And so we crunched the data, we created these maps. Luckily, the partner on that, he's a PhD astroparticle physicist. So he mapped space particulates coming to Earth for his PhD thesis. He is like incredible. And then he coded for Lockheed Martin. And I mean, the guy, and now he's an attorney. He's just a brainiac. But we created this incredible map where he could actually see exactly what parts of the field were really profitable, mid-profitable, and like very low profitability or losing money. And he rents this particular field from a landlord. So he was able to take that map to the landlord and say, look, I'm not going to rent this strip anymore because I have proof now that it's not profitable. And I'd like to put it into NRCS conservation easement and make a pollinator reservoir out of it. But he couldn't do that because the landlord wanted him to rent that as arable land. And without our module, he couldn't prove it. And what's interesting is that the John Deere Ops and the Harvest Profit both didn't show that that was losing money. It was only when we brought the two together, disparate systems, and made them work together that we were able to see that. And so, I'm glad you talked about that axiology feature of farmland, because the same is for timber, the same is for fishing. If we don't change the system of food and agriculture, it'll eventually implode because money drives the system. However, we do need a digitized community like this to service, to even like scale this, with this technology. So that's why I have these other crazy businesses, is because they're needed parts of the system and nobody had built them. And, we need them to all work together to service the community, just like this Priceline guy. He's developed a really interesting AI module around predicting supply chain fluctuations and then figuring out where excesses can be efficiently moved to fill deficits so that we can really effectively target, like what happened during COVID when the shelves were suddenly empty, and, how we have famine in one country and excess and stuff being dumped in another. And, again, what a valuable plugin, like to plug into a platform like that, to where you could look at a region and say, hey, we have massive crop losses happening down here and it's spring up north. Like, the whole global food economy should
probably be paying attention and having some AI intelligence that helps us understand how to balance that out so that we're not having, you know, these wild fluctuations. So, you know, that's where it gets to systems thinking. Like, it's crazy because there's no end to it. The more you look, the more you find. But yeah. That module with the mapping is really fun. I'm happy to show
So
it to you.
somehow you have to tie a bow around. That's right. Because we're like all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I feel like it needs to be tethered and put into a centralized place. You know, again, it just, yeah. Once we have a community, we can service a community to actually get the things done we want to get done.
But the point of a community, I mean, to sell the idea of a community means there has to be a value proposition in place that makes sense to the community, and it makes sense to an investor, you know, where there's a beginning point and then there is an extension of where this could go to. So the most logical community seems to be the farmer, you know, so a farmer representation. And then the farmer, of course, is not going to give us any money unless it's maybe a commission of something that they are profiting from. But you know, what is the value that we are bringing to the farmer? No, would be sort of the first issue, and how can they make money by working with us? And yes, there is the regeneration of their soil and the value inherent in their lands by repairing it or bringing it back to health. But then, you know, what else is there? So finding markets.
Finding markets is the biggest motivator.
So that's but simultaneously of you know, developing this proposition for farmers of bringing having farmers indicate A, they are interested to participate, B, they are willing to comply with performance standards that have to be in place to you know, assure that there's a credibility in their product. So you know, so that would have to be in place, and then you know, we can go to the market and say we have farmers who have committed themselves to, you know, these value enhancing processes and steps, and here are the types of crops that we need to bring to market. Can you take that? And then you know, just scan through with catering organizations, restaurant chains, with CPG manufacturers that are scaled, you know, and see what that would be. But that means you have to have staff, right? I mean, it takes somebody
you do
spend time on the phone to isolate all of this. So that's an organizational issue. So I mean, I just think the presentation as it is right now is interesting and good, but it doesn't clearly specify to a potential investor. It's the idea. The idea is great, but how you go about this? What is step 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And who's all engaged in these 1, 2, 3, 4 steps?
Right. Yeah, that is the challenge. And to do it all on nothing, on fumes, you know, that's what's hard.
Well, go ahead.
From the presentation, the second picture, the second slide, paints the big problem, and every additional slide in the presentation should figure out how to present the innovation broker as the solution to the problem. All right, so that there's a continuous thought from beginning to end, so that I don't get lost in the detail of the individual slides and forget what the whole thing was about. Every
Yeah.
single slide has to focus on the central theme of the presentation. Right?
Yeah.
I told Klaus before, I did hundreds of terrible presentations where by slide 10, you couldn't remember what was on slide 1, right?
Yeah,
And,
it's an easy trap to fall in,
it's
isn't it?
because we become focused on the content of the slides, and it distracts us from
Yes.
the theme of the entire presentation.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the
a really
same way
good
when
point.
you said with systems thinking, the more you seek, the more you find. The
Mhm.
difficulty with that is that we tend to become lost in the detail and
Yeah.
miss the essence of what it is. Because typically in any system collection of relationships, there are a few central relationships that tend to drive the behavior of the overall model.
Mhm.
I had this model that was developed that had about 30 some loops in it, and it unfolded in the story absolutely beautifully. But by the time I got to the 10th loop, nobody could figure out what the hell I was talking about. And then after pondering it for quite some time, I realized that all 30 of these loops are talking about dealing with unwanted pregnancy, unwanted births, or sex education. And I could explain the whole model in 3 loops. And then tying those 3 together. And and then somebody says, well, is that all there is to it? No, there's a lot more to it. And you could click a button and show them 10 more loops that were part of this one loop, but you don't overwhelm them with all of the detail.
Front. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Because otherwise the listener does get lost in the detail.
Mhm.
And the presenter gets lost in the detail
Yeah, absolutely.
because now you
And I
are,
live in it because I do it every day. Like we're actually doing this. You know what I mean? That's the crazy thing is like my job is doing this today, but I'm just doing it in a dysfunctional way. Between a couple different organizations. I think that's the part that is like the most complicated. Like we're actually actively doing this right now.
so it's zooming in and zooming out, right? So
Mhm.
there is a big zooming out, what
Yeah.
Gene was just saying, was step way,
Yes.
way back. And so when you
Right.
think way, way back is, there's a big problem. We are in a perfect storm. We got some
Yeah.
huge issues here that need to be solved, that need to be addressed fairly soon.
Mhm.
And the solution really is on the farm. The farmer needs to restore their soil because that implies restoration of biodiversity,
Yeah.
water maintenance, the hydrological cycles.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
and
those are all those things that are a result of realignment of food and agricultural activities with human health outcomes and climate resiliency.
right.
Like once we do that, everything else falls into place. And there's so many different details of that. But like, for example, my first call this morning, 6 a.m., was we're lining up Farm Aid, Willie Nelson wants regenerative potatoes. They called me. Random. Willie Nelson's team calls. And so we're lining up this value chain around regenerative potatoes. We have 8 million pounds, coming into the market. We still have a few million pounds from last year. And, now we have a French fry maker from Washington, D.C., McCain as the co-packer, my former fractional COO as the corporate or the consultant, because he used to run the Lamb Weston French fry packing plant for like 15 years. So he knows fries and potatoes. And then we're brokering it like to come off the farm. So we had the farmers, the French fry guys, like everybody, and they were all on the East Coast. It was a 6 a.m. call. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that's where, because I'm in the middle of it and we're orchestrating it and figuring it out. Because I have to, this is my job. I have to feed a family. So I can't stop and model for months because I have to feed my family. Like I have to be working, you know what I mean? And so like, we're actually actively doing this on the fly, which the problem is it's not as organized as it should be. And we don't have the marketing in place, you know what I mean? To like really share the story of what we're doing because
And
we
it's
have not.
capacity. it's capacity constrained because
It's big time.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
only
big
as much
time.
time as you have in the day.
The constraint
Mhm.
is Joni.
Yeah, I need to get out of the way. That's why I need an organization that we can scale, that can do this. You know what I mean? Like, because it's, I mean, the fact that they call up and they're like, well, we own Legends Catering. I mean, they do all the major ballparks and concert halls like across the country. And if you can help us get a regenerative French fry program in place, we'll commit to it. I mean, those are big contracts, so so we're working on our pilot, we're getting it done, we're trying to get it to the finish line. And then Charlie's Organic Produce Distribution committed. They're a large distributor. They want in on it too. And then Misfits Market wants a little over 1 million pounds a year of these potatoes. So like now we've just aggregated demand to pull them through the value chain into 3 separate sales channels. So like we're literally doing it. And we know that there's demand, otherwise they wouldn't have called and asked us to do it. You know what I mean? And then the farmers are sitting on millions of pounds of regenerative potatoes. And, obviously they want the 3 Ps. They want provenance, they want pride and stewardship, and they want a premium, and so that's what we've been doing for the last year is we're like, cool, we'll come in and we'll try to advocate for those 3 Ps so that we can start to turn the engine. And it's starting to happen, I mean, it's just flow, and because it's just me. I mean, my husband works with me as well, and he runs more of the logistics and operations side of it, but we're grossly understaffed. But, it's because we're capital constrained. So that's why I do need to get a presentation, because I mean, I had a call yesterday with someone who said, I want to invest in this. We've been looking for this. How much do you want? I was like, ah. So, yeah. It kind of gives you a little bit of a paralysis moment, like a panic paralysis, especially when you're like, yes, we need to get this done. And yes, I desperately need a paycheck again someday. Like, let's get this done. Let's like start doing this at scale so we can help more companies and bail our farmers out. Cause I don't want another season of telling the farmers I work with, I can't help them, cause there's not enough of me to go around.
Well, it seems like the priority should be to approach investors and with a well thought out idea to say, here's where we are. Get letters of support from like the advisory council and the people that you have on the PowerPoint. Have each one of them write a letter of support, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We're in on this. And this can be made to work, but we have a number of people in here that can't work for free. We will need a startup period of 3 to 4 months to put systems in place that are scalable, and so we can start working. We need an operating team, starting with a COO. Who can actually engage, and put some rubber on the road in this regard.
Yeah.
So I would focus on that, right? I mean, based on what you have heard so far and the people that may be the way to go. But then that requires, also an operating plan that explains the phases and steps that have to fall in place to make that work. So here we are today. Here's the team that's prepared to engage. Our game plan is that within 30 days we bring on board a COO. Within the next 30 days we will have developed an IT infrastructure that can be applied. So that kind of thing, right? And then we can go to Kate and whoever else you have and say,
Yeah.
can you kick in some support here?
I really think we could get the support with the right thing. And you know what's, interesting is back in 2019 when I was building precursors of this, I had never, obviously, I mean, I've been married for 25 years, so I'd never been on an online dating site. But I thought, okay, well, maybe we could white label an online dating site tech structure to pilot this. So we could load everybody in just like a dating platform. And you can have farmers and you can have buyers and you can have processors. And they just, because the way that dating platforms are coded is they assess like, what are your interests? What do you like? What do you not like? How do you look? So it's values, attribute driven search compatibility technology. And so I actually signed up for a bunch of dating platforms just to see how it worked. And then I realized that they were live and I was actually on the market. And I was like, oh no, like my email, I started getting pings from guys that were like, hey, I'm in the Spokane, Washington area. I'd love to go on a date. And I was like, oh crap, like I'm happily married. I'm not looking to date. I just was curious and wanted to figure this out. So I had to dump that. But I did find some white label dating platforms that were very inexpensive and they're literally plug and play. And I still think that there could be some value in just doing that as a beta. And then you can hire a coding team to build your IT structure so that you actually have like a, what you really want. But those are expensive.
So Joni, it's like, how do you put all this into a box, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because there are so many moving parts here.
Oh, I
And
know.
the nice thing about a project plan is that you're going to put down what you're going to do next, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you realize that no, you can't really do that because it doesn't really fit into the plan, into the way how the plan needs to unfold.
Right.
Because when you look at the IT infrastructure that is really needed, as a first stage engagement here, that may be far more practical and rudimentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's more a support system to be met that assists managing accounts, and doing these connections, because to do so much automation costs a ton of money, when you develop IT systems like that. So
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
you're totally manual. Well, let's go from totally manual to first
Automated.
stages of automation, right?
Right.
When money comes in, because then you can also know what you need in forms of automation. Right now you assume, but
Mm-hmm.
that may not be the right thing at all. Right now we know that we need to have farmers that we are tracking based on a number of criteria. We need to know what their regenerative status is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of capacity they have for what types of crops and what they're
Yeah.
interested in, that sort of thing. And then we need to know markets where we know what types of crops certain market participants are
Well,
interested in.
and the good thing is we already have a really good farming in like a input form, like and we have a initial regenerative vetting tool developed. They're not finished, but they're like at least kind of there. You know what I mean? And we have a very comprehensive value-added player screening tool that we got USDA funds to build this year. And that's going live in a couple of weeks, the interactive map.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you still need to go to an investor first.
Yeah.
And explain the organizational frame that you need to build in order to use these tools. Right? I mean, it's great to have these tools, but who's going to use them?
Correct.
Who's going to apply them, right?
I need to get all of the links of all of the things that we've already built in one spot so that like they can go, okay, here's what the value chain assessment partner form looks like. Oh, cool. Here's an existing map where we see where the infrastructure is, or, like the farming network maps that we've already developed. Where, you can go, okay, across these farms, how many acres are they farming? How many bushels of what commodities do they have?
But
because
is this really
we've done
something?
that.
Is this really something you would need to explain to someone who wants to potentially invest? Or is this like
I
what she
think
was saying? How do you, are these additional information loops that may come?
like they probably would be secondary, tertiary loops. But I think that they might be really important for people that are wondering if we're 100% starting from nothing. And it's really more of like, we have a lot of things built, they just need to be stitched together. And I think that depending on the investor, that might make them feel a little more comfortable knowing that it's like, there's been a lot of groundwork already done. And
Yeah, so
some pretty good stuff already built.
So the way Gene was defining it, he has 30 loops, but he only needs 3 to explain the basic concept. And then when questions come up, then you can open up another loop, right? That gets into the specific questions as they arise. And actually, the key loops that we may want to show to a potential investor should encourage questions, right? I mean, so how would you do that? Or how do you go about that? Right? So then that's a matter, because you don't know where the investor goes. And if you show 30 loops, they lose track.
And
but
all of my investor decks historically, I never go over like 12 to 15 slides. We don't, like, this is like an explanation deck to explain like the deep dive. But like, I use the Sequoia Capital kind of template for investor decks. Just that's very concise and minimal detail. So, but this presentation is more like for partners and collaborators and people who want to deep dive. Do you know what I mean? It's not an investor deck. And the investor deck will be some of the stuff, but it'll be very limited. Because the investors only want to see certain things. They want to know what, why, how, and what it's going to generate from ROI. That's literally all they care about. And do you have a good team that can get it done?
Right.
They don't want to know any more than that. And the longer the deck, the less likely they are to ever read it. And so, yeah, I mean, when it goes, I mean, and I've done so much investing and I've pitched to hundreds of investors over the years, and worked with many successful teams that have raised a ton of money and like really kind of deep dove into the intel there. But for partner and collaborator decks, those need to be a little bit more in depth. You know what I mean? Like full presentation decks. But I'm a firm believer investor decks should never have more than 12 to 15 slides max. 10 if you can do it.
So we're sort of over the hour. So what, did you get anything out of this conversation?
Yes, I did. Because it's helping me just kind of bring it back to our conversations earlier, Klaus, of like, you know, like corporate structure, since there are multiple things all moving, plates spinning right now, how to get all the cars onto the same racetrack. And then which car do we put the gas in? That's really what it is. And, yeah, and this is helpful because fresh eyes, Gene, I appreciate it because fresh eyes. I'm going to work on value proposition too. I need to really have a good, you know, that's the hardest part, I think, of anything is the value proposition.
Yeah.
Well, there are multiple value propositions because there are multiple stakeholders in this puzzle.
Yeah.
So presenting the wrong value proposition to the wrong stakeholder gets us nowhere.
True. However, there's some centralized themes that are consistent across the audiences and whatnot, where really access is a key theme that is present in every stakeholder that would be a participant here.
Which is the innovation broker.
Yeah, it's facilitating access. That's the magical center that it will be the same importance to every segment of the community, is that by facilitating access to whatever that may be, it allows them to do business better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, earlier we talked about the organizational frame, and if you can just make a decision and lock that down, and then you can build it out. So, because it sounded earlier like you're sort of floating with, which direction are we going here and what are the risks of this. I think if you lock that down into the green,
Greetings, Global.
yeah, and say, okay, that's just it. Talk with Amanda and see how, she sees that fit together, and how you connect those two entities, either merge them or connect them, and then you can move forward with it. Yeah. And if Andrea comes in with something, I think that's very easy to deflect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just more of the like stuff that makes you worry and is like rather unproductive.
Yeah, but I would just suggest put that aside for now, and just lock that down, right? That's the entity, and then and then there's this very simple value proposition. Here's what we plan on doing.
Yeah.
In which you already pretty much have in place the key pieces.
Yeah.
And then the project outline has to be a little bit more specific in the sense of we need ground-based funding. We need to develop an operating team, starting with a COO, and we need to develop the IT capacity to manage these process structures.
Yeah. I just found my original value proposition from back in like 2017, and it was making supply chains simple, transparent, and accessible through use of human connection and decentralized consumerization.
Sounds good.
It actually is kind of funny coming back around to it, 100 iterations later. It's the ugliest pitch deck I've ever seen. Oh my gosh. I look at those early ones and go, wow. So ugly. That does kind of sum it up though. I'm gonna noodle on that. Gene, it's a pleasure just to, get to share a brainwave time with somebody who thinks like you do. I'm very grateful that you're taking time out of your Friday to go on this crazy thought rodeo with me.
This is what I do. Okay? I bill myself as storyteller / recovering system thinker. Okay.
That's perfect. We might need bumper stickers. That's great. Yeah, and it has been helpful because I've like Klaus said, like I've got to get this to the finish line and figure out how it's going to move forward in a clear manner. I can't dawdle any longer. And especially now that we're actually actively doing these projects, I'm like, who are we doing it under? Like what entity is doing this business? And that's another thing as well. So, I just appreciate it, guys. And I know it's Friday and late for you, Gene, so I'll let you go. And Klaus has been stuck with me for hours today. He probably needs a stiff drink after all of that.
In a couple of hours, I will send you a link to the video and a summary of the call.
Oh, thank you. That would be great. I can drive myself crazy again. So thanks a lot, you guys. Have a great holiday weekend.
Bye.
Fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.